Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the channel. So I thought I would have a little bit of a discussion today on the Mint Collective that's coming up here in a couple of weeks. I really hadn't thought about it in a little while because if you guys remember, we had quite discussions about that. But obviously, with situations involving COVID, they had to reschedule. And now we're coming up here. It's towards the end of the month of March. So here we are. And I was reminded about it just the other day. And I did see a couple of messages about it and some postings. Originally, if you guys remember, we had a little bit of fun with it, in terms of the folks that were getting invited, including our good friend Jeremy from Beckett, whose mugshot and wonderful picture that I've had some fun with on the live stream was included as part of the promotional package for it. But all that said, I really hadn't given it much of a second thought until I was reminded about it this week. And that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of going over to the website itself and kind of scanning it and taking a closer look at it. And one of the things that struck me as worth re-examining and kind of revisiting is the whole idea that they have as far as the panels and the different discussion topics that they have with their various guests that they invited over to it. So what I've got here is the Mint Collective website up on the screen, and I'm going to do a comparison to something else in a minute. Now, before I continue, I was originally thinking about a couple different ways that I could do this, and I was going at various levels of snarkiness. I am going to have a little bit of snarkiness, to be fair. If you've ever listened to this channel, that's kind of what I do. However, that said, I want to lead in front with something very specific. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with panels because, as a matter of fact, in a lot of different kinds of shows, you think like a fan expo, some of the comic book ones, they have panels for different shows where they invite people to talk about, give stories and give information. And also, one of my favorite things to do on this channel is to do comparisons to other hobbies and other genres of collecting. And I'm actually going to give you an example where the whole panel and seminar and kind of symposium idea is actually used very effectively. So in principle, I'm not against the idea at all. But once you start taking a look at the lineup and kind of what they have in mind here, that's where it gets a little bit murky, a little bit questionable. Now, looking at the site, I'm actually first on the section that relates to all the different ticket prices. So initially at the $15 base price, you're offered 1 day access to the marketplace, and there's an exclusive white sparkle parallel NFT from Panini. So, fair enough, whatever. So that's pretty standard 1 day purchase package. The green parallel version here is the full weekend pass, basically. So very similar stuff to the first one. You also get a commemorative ticket or poster from Andy Friedman, so fair enough. So you scroll up a little bit higher, you get the gold version of the pass, and that one includes full VIP access, the NFT parallel, as well as the exclusive autograph opportunities, quote unquote. And they've got some decent autograph guests, so I'll give them that. And then, of course, the poster or ticket or poster by Andy Friedman. And then we move up to the top level here, and that is the $6.99 signature level. And that is the one that gives you access to the signature sessions, which is specifically what I want to talk about here in a minute. In addition to all these other things, you also get exclusive 2021 UFC White Sparkle parallel card, which I think is in a couple of these lower levels. Nope, those are NFTs. So actually, you do get a real card here, as well as an Otani Mint Collective Edition card. You get the poster, you get shares in iconic cards and memorabilia and collectibles. So there you go, a little bit of fractional. Panini Auto Memorabilia card for 250 random purchasers, exclusive autograph opportunities, and a referral program. So if you can potentially get some of your money back by getting other people to buy into the $6.99 level. So fair enough. And the gift bag, I'm sure, has plenty of value in it, so that's fine. Okay, so in order to get into these signature sessions, you need to pay the $6.99 level. That's what you're looking at. Now, if we click on the signature sessions itself, then that leads us into the page regarding the panels. So I'm going to go into this here and kind of go through it and go through the different panels and kind of talk through them a little bit. And then you're kind of see where my head's at as far as this is concerned. But before I do want to do a comparison because I mentioned to you a second ago, I love comparing it to other genres of collecting. And I mentioned at the beginning, in order to preface all of this, is that I have no moral opposition to the idea of having speakers and panels and things like that, because I think there's an educational piece that can be done. I think there is value to that. A lot of it is based on your execution, and a lot of it is based on the mentality you take going into it when you set it up. So that's really, really important. And one other element that I would throw at you, and I'm going from memory here, but I believe earlier on in Beckett's podcast, he talked about the early nationals. And I think they did have little seminar kind of gatherings as well, where they kind of traded some knowledge and shared some information at that time too. So in the early days of the National, they did have an element of this. So the Mint Collective is kind of trying to bring back this concept, but obviously executed very differently. Now, let me show you. One reference point that I always like to do is numismatic, so coin collecting. And they've got on their end, so I'm actually going to back up from this. Let me take one step back. So you've got the National Money Show. So they coming up here. So this weekend actually was in Colorado Springs. They're doing their own National Money Show, and as part of that, you got your admission to public, all that, relatively low dollar amounts. Now again, obviously, coins are a little bit of an older hobby as far as longer existing, but it's also the American Numismatic Association has been around a long time, and then obviously it tends to skew older. However, understanding this, they're trying to, of course, maintain the membership they have, trying to maintain the collector base they have, but also trying to grow it for the next generation in particular. So that's always a bit of a thing because children under 12 are free and things like that, and free for ANA members, and then retired military personnel. So they're trying to appeal to a bunch of demographics. But that's beyond the scope of kind of what I want to talk about here. But the idea is that they've got this show that's going on this weekend, and as part of it, if you scroll down, they've got a section here called Learning Opportunities. So it'll kind of come together with what I'm going to talk about with the Mid Collective thing. So if I click on this, here you've got Grading Fundamentals Seminar. So they've actually got 2-day seminars where you've got some information about grading. So you can imagine that would be a very educational piece. So the first one is counterfeit detection. So that right there is pretty useful. And then the second one is fundamentals of grading. So these are 2-day seminars. So obviously they're including this kind of thing into it because they understand there's a value to bringing in an expert that can then help people and instruct them. And as a collector, this is kind of great information for you. Learning the fundamentals of grading and then understanding how to do some counterfeit detection yourself. This educational piece could be something that would be a boon for something like Mid Collective. So imagine if CSG, who has done seminars on grading, imagine if they were doing a seminar at this show. So there's maybe a little bit of a suggestion for you that kind of falls in line with the same concept where you're providing an educational piece. I don't have in front of me what the cost or value would be of this, but I can imagine this certainly having a value because you're bringing in an expert. Because in this case, you're talking about an NGC grader conserver and ANA authenticator conserver. So somebody with an expertise, bringing them in to help teach this seminar. And then, of course, you would control and register and do all that. So that's one piece. And then the second element of it, in the same vein, is they've got what they call money talks. And this is actually a whole schedule of things on different topics. And I'll kind of bring this back to the Main Collective thing in a second. But number one, they're free and open to the public. And if you click on it, that's when you get the schedule. And what you're going to see is you're going to have a bunch of different talks from different experts talking about very specific themed niche topics. Now, again, if you're not into coin collecting, I know a lot of this stuff might be boring for you. That's fine. I'm not worried about that. The point here is that all of these folks come in with a certain expertise, and somebody who sits in one of these can pick and choose when they want to because they're all free. So the idea here is that this is for education. You want to learn a little bit about different types of, $1804. You've got a seminar for that, a talk for that. You've got information here about a Colorado dollar. You've got information about the US dollar boom in the 70s and 80s, how silver dollar hoards and books fueled that boom. So it's a little bit of a historical one. So the point is, all of these have different specific themes. So in this case, the point of all this stuff is education. The point of all this stuff is to encourage people to sit in on some of these and maybe learn something. And that's kind of the general approach that they decided to take to it, which I think is a good approach. It helps to expand the potential audience because it's basically telling people, hey, if you want to participate in this, these are some opportunities. You can sit in on any of these that interest you, and then you can kind of go from there. And these are included for free, obviously. So let's kind of compare and contrast that now with the signature sessions. As mentioned before, you have to buy into that $6.99 ticket to get in on these signature sessions. So you're paying for the privilege here, in addition to the goodie bag and everything else. So what kind of value are you getting from it in comparison? I told you a moment ago that this other idea, that I'm not morally opposed to having talks and panels and things like that, where I think there's some value. In this case, we're paying for the privilege indirectly. So what kind of value are we bringing to the table? So let's scroll through some of these signature sessions and take a look at them. So starting off on the Friday, we start off with this first one. Preview event, local card shop owners cocktail party discussion and Q&A. So you get to ask some questions from some folks. So you got Rob from Burbank Sports Cards, Tyler Santiago from Santiago Sports, and Mel Lundgren from, I don't know what that logo is. But anyway, so the idea here is join local hobby heroes. Now, I have a question about this one. Rob from Burbank Sports Cards. I know they're doing this in Vegas. So California is a neighboring state. Santiago, though, I don't think is necessarily from a neighboring state. So I'm not sure where the local comes in here, but I'm going to let that one go. I could see some value, I suppose, to this from the Q&A perspective. But, if you're just hanging out, but, it's 45 minutes, I guess, asking some questions. But in fairness, Santiago, although he has a YouTube following and stuff, he's still relatively new because if memory serves me, when he was on a live with Golden, he didn't even have allocation at the shop. So a lot of things he was buying secondary market, which is fine. You know, allocation is a tricky thing to do, especially if you don't have an established shop that's been around a long time. But like, I can imagine that Rob from Burbank Sports Cards would probably have much more to say in regards to different kinds of questions, whereas Santiago's a lot newer. Mind you, if you're trying to get old school versus new school, but I think Burbank's done a pretty good job integrating the online elements. So, like I said, this panel composition is a little odd for me, but you know, I could definitely do. You could do worse, so that's fine. So let's kind of move forward. All right, second one, case study: becoming cardboard millionaires. Now, this is the one is if you check out Sports Card Radio, they definitely made fun of this one, and understandably so. And I'm going to resist. I'm going to resist. But I know shock to those of you who watch the channel. I'm going to resist the low hanging fruit on this one. However, I am going to point out something. I'm going to read what it says, and then I'm going to point out some minor issues that I see here. So, personal question: are you in it for the money? Pick the rules, tricks, and techniques used by some of the most passionate collectors in the space to build a PC with a healthy bottom line and learn how they balance passion with profits. Oh, it just sounds incredibly exciting. Uh, there's a lot. There's a lot of fodder here, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna resist most of it. But I am going to say that I just don't see this as being tremendously valuable. Almost all of these individuals have been on various interviews and things. And if you wanted to ask questions, you've had an infinite number of opportunities. An extra 45 minutes here in the evening in Vegas, go to the casino, skip this. Like, you do you, man. If you paid for it, I guess you would want to get maximum value out of it. But truthfully, how do you become a cardboard millionaire? Well, you flip and you buy low and sell high and you rinse and repeat and you try to be selective. Like, unless the idea here is to give specific picks, which would probably be a terrible idea, unless the specific goal is to do that, like, what great techniques are we going to be talking about here? You do your research, figure out opportunities, identify them, do it with some conviction. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you'll lose. But if you've got some experience, heaven forbid, then you're probably going to do okay. And if you're able to do that and increasingly move into bigger and bigger dollar amounts, well, then eventually you're probably going to wake up one morning and be a cardboard millionaire. But if you're more of a collector, then who cares if you're a cardboard millionaire? Because while that's a nice thing to brag about, I suppose, it's one of those things where, like, to me, unless you're gonna make it liquid, unless you're going to sell it, being a paper millionaire isn't really anything that I would brag about or be impressed by, but I guess to each their own. Now, that said, Caged Lawyer, he does his podcast with Lucas Tigers and Bronze. Eric Myers working with PWCC and also working as a dealer and doing a lot of that. But again, the first two there's plenty of accessible points to be able to ask questions about this. So it's not like, and this is maybe a reoccurring theme that I'm going to have with a lot of these panels. I feel like a lot of this stuff is stuff that you would have different access to because almost everybody in the hobby is relatively accessible, which is to say, you don't really need to sit into a panel to get a lot of the information, quote unquote, that they're going to be able to offer you because a lot of these folks are more than willing to talk about a lot of these things. You just pretty much have to ask and bring them into the venue. But again, to each their own. Okay, moving on forward into the Saturday. So this one's the opening keynote. This one has some potential to be a little bit interesting. So opening keynote, a new hobby era, how and why billions are floating in. So obviously you have Josh Luber from Fanatics. The second gentleman, Brent Montgomery, I didn't know too much about. Apparently that he goes from a media company, I think it's called Wheelhouse. I don't know too much about it. Bob Means from eBay, certainly I would find any insights he has at this point, especially given eBay's recent move into vaulting. That could be very interesting. Peyton Manning with Omaha Productions. So I feel like this is a situation as well where you're kind of being a little redundant with some of the folks you grab on the panel. And this happens again in a later panel as well. Like you got Peyton Manning with a production company, and then you got Wheelhouse with a production company. And to be blunt, I hadn't heard of Wheelhouse as a production company. Obviously, Peyton Manning is Peyton Manning, in addition to having Omaha Productions, which I believe is doing the Ken Golden TV show or the streaming show. So, like, I could definitely see why you want to talk to him. I'm not sure what Brent Montgomery has done in. And the fact that I have to Google him means, like, I don't even know who you are. That, by the way, that doesn't mean anything. Like, there's a lot of folks in the hobby that operate and are very successful. And not everybody, they're not household names, so to speak. But it just seems like a weird... I'd almost rather just have Josh Luber, Bob Means from eBay, and then Peyton Manning from Omaha, and I feel like that's enough. Especially since you're doing... this one is actually going to be a little bit longer, which is good. An hour and 15 minutes, it looks like. So that's good. At least they gave him a little extra time, and then Ursula Levine from Collectible as the moderator. So that's fine. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to kind of look at these different panels and see how much I feel like value-wise there is there. The next one I think is all right. The future of the breaking business. So if you have any interest in that portion of the business, the breaking piece. So you got three different breakers. You got Sarah Layton from Layton's, Wax, Mike Vinacore there. The moderator is Stephanie Garcia from Mama Breaks, sure. And then Kelly Brangham from Sports Cards for You, who I'm less familiar with, but they're all breakers. So if they're having a conversation on breaking, you may as well get real breakers and be moderated by a breaker. So not too bad at all. I think that's fine. Not necessarily something I'd be looking into, but if you want some insight on breaking, this makes perfect sense. I'm completely okay with this composition and this grouping. That's fine. This next one here, I think, has the potential to be the most interesting. Like like I said, I question some of the panels here and how valuable it really is. However, this has the potential to be very interesting because here you've got under one roof, the four big grading companies as far as I'm concerned. You got Peter from SGC, you got Jeremy Murray, good friend of the channel, Jeremy Murray from Beckett, you got Andy Broom from CSG representing CSG, and Kevin Linane, president of PSA. So their insights on what they feel like the future of authentication and grading, that could be a very interesting discussion. Right here, this is probably one of this thus far would be, I think, the most insightful piece where you could potentially get some interesting thoughts about what the future holds. But again, I would pay for this, but as far as intrigue, I think this is a legitimately very interesting panel. So next, we've got the power of the art of cards. So this is kind of a more niche topic, subjective piece. I do like the composition of folks they put on it, which is kind of interesting. So you got DJ Ski, who's obviously produced some cards, so that's kind of interesting. Kevin Girage, I'm not familiar with, to be perfectly honest, so he could be great, but I don't know. Gina Arena from Arena Designs, definitely great history in a lot of hobby design. Carvin Chung, who's done a lot as far as design and building sets, infamous sets, and I know Christina from Card Ladder is very passionate about the art of things. So I think as a niche kind of themed topic, I think this is interesting. So this one here, I think, has the potential to be the most insightful as far as, potential takeaways that could be really interesting. This one, though, is a great classic themed panel on a specific topic. So the art of cards. So I do like that they included this into it. That kind of falls in line with some of the examples I gave you from the ANA Money Show one. So this, I think, is perfectly good. And obviously, Carvin has forgotten more about cards than most people know. Gene from Arena Design knows a tremendous amount in terms of a lot of history in the hobby and a lot of iconic designs. And DJ Ski has a lot of experience recently in doing a lot of work with it. So this is perfectly fine. I think this is completely in line with the kind of thing you'd want. This next one here is the bull case. Why sports collectibles are legitimate alternative assets. I could see it being interesting if you're legitimately intrigued by it. Alternative assets and and this whole case here, PWCC Jesse Craig, Urza from Collectible. I'll just be blunt. This feels like an easy skip. Like if it was me, this would be where I'd take my lunch break. I just don't really need to hear folks that are in the space. They're trying to tell me why they're legitimate alternate assets because there's plenty of ad copy and interviews where they make the same case over a longer form, and you've had plenty of opportunities to hear it. So the future of the card shop by Card Ladder. If you're interested in the future of brick and mortar, kind of a niche topic, but Costco Card I know has a presence and is available. Again, a lot of these folks you can get your hands on talking to them in various formats and interviews in the past. But again, if it's something that interests you, certainly. And then Bullpen LA, there's been a successful card shop over in Los Angeles, so I get it, but fair enough. I'll move on here. How to buy and sell smarter in 2022. Sure. We'll go with it. So we've got Eric from Whatnot, Jeff Wilson, Sports Card Investor, who probably could fit into another panel that I'll talk about here in a second. Darren Ravel from Action K, sure. And then it's moderated by Mike Giuseppe from Sports Card Nonsense. We'll come back to him in a minute. So here it says, unprecedented access to technology and media have completely transformed buying, selling, and trading in 2021. Learn how you can harness this power to get ahead of the curve and when you should be shut out the world and trust your gut instead. Oh, man. Skip it. So case study, the rise of the UFC. I think this is just fun. I like the UFC, so, that's cool. And then, of course, you got a representative of Panini there, and obviously they have the license for UFC, so that's kind of neat. I just think it's kind of a cool thing. Again, it'd be one of those things where I'd be interested just sitting in hearing some of the information, but I wouldn't pay for it, but I don't know if that's the kind of insight you need, but whatever. This one here on Sunday is kind of interesting. So opening keynote on Sunday is the future of sports memorabilia and storytelling. So for the most part, great. Why not? Look, I would pay attention to this one just to hear if Brian Gray says something crazy, something entertaining and crazy. That's honestly where my interest would be in this. Otherwise, no, I'm good. So next one here, the power of building community, the foundation of the hobby. Sure. And I think they've got a pretty large panel here. They've got Ken Rogers from MySlabs moderating. You've got Hannah and Sam from Women of the Hobby, and she collects cards. I don't know what drip is. I'm not familiar with it. You've got Evan from Dibs. So, okay, fair enough. Um, I guess this would be just if you're specifically interested in this kind of topic. Again, I feel like this topic has been touched on at different venues and things. I don't know if a panel is necessarily needed for it, but if you get some value out of it, it's 45 minutes. It's not that crazy. So we'll move on from there. Okay, so this one here is kind of an interesting one as well. The power of creating authentic content by Card Ladder. Now, this one I'm a little dubious about, and not for necessarily the reasons you might think, but Rip, Pack, and Slab. I know a little bit about them because you got Peter Pac-Man in there, who I'm somewhat familiar with. I don't know too much about him. Jeremy's there, which is fine. I get it. And then Josh from Card Ladder is the moderator on it. Sure, that's fine. Card Ladder is obviously one of the key sponsors and contributors to this. Now, here you got Mike Giuseppe and Jesse Gibson from Sports Card Nonsense. Now, if you know anything about the background of Sports Card Nonsense, they started this podcast, but relatively early on, got under the radar and joined the Ringer, and then became part of a kind of the Spotify family. So one of the things that says here is something amazing is happening at the grassroots of the hobby. Collectors are connecting and unprecedented new diverse forces are emerging. Get inspired by the rainmakers building their communities on uncompromisingly authentic content. So I don't doubt for one second that the argument here to be made is that that the content is authentic, it's uncompromised because of being part of a big network and everything. But literally, you've got two of the Sports Card Nonsense guys who are part of the Ringer, which is owned by Spotify. Even if they got promised the ability to literally say whatever they want, and they do say some interesting things, I don't know if I would really consider that uncompromised authentic content, but I guess, they'll argue that they're being as their authentic selves at all times. So fair enough. But when you've got a sponsor in kind of a section there's certain expectations meant on the content you're producing, that always kind of compromises your content just naturally. It has to. You kind of have to acknowledge that. Now you can work the biases into the show so that people understand what they're getting into, but I don't know about that one. And also at the same vein, it's like, do we really need a panel on uncompromisingly authentic content and a discussion on that? Discover the motivations to drive them. Great. Sounds exciting. Okay, next, the case for buying Grails and Goats. All right, so you got Joe Orlando from previously of PSA and Collectors Universe, and now Collectible. You got Chris McGill from Card Ladder, David Liner from Tops, James Beckett from Beckett, formerly of Beckett, now independent, and then hosted by Andrew Goldberg. So looking at this one, learn the psychology behind what drives these assets and long-term investability of these iconic items. Yes, because we've never discussed this topic. And because James Beckett definitely isn't on a live streaming thing on a semi-regular basis where you can ask his opinion on it, doesn't have a podcast where he gives a lot of his opinion on it. And we've never heard this topic from any of these individuals. Like I said, I feel like there's so many opportunities. And even with if you're going to, jokes aside, snark aside here, if you're going to leverage a Beckett, I feel like you could do better. I feel like you could really go into nitty gritty on a topic and really take advantage of that understanding and that knowledge and really play into it. And Joe Orlando certainly has a lot of experience, having had his experiences at Collectors Universe and PSA. I feel like this is kind of a light topic for them to potentially be hitting on, where it's like you've got Beckett for one panel here, and this is what you decide to use it on. But I guess to each their own. Fair enough. So moving on, the closing one is all Card Ladder all the time with Josh Luber as well. The Hobby in the Future by Card Ladder. The arrival of good data means the hobby's never going to be the same, but that's okay. It can be better. Josh Luber breaks down the state of the hobby with the Card Ladder team. Potentially interesting, but at the same time, Josh Luber is doing the interview circuit. I almost feel like you could pretty much get this in about 50 other places. You could do this in 10 more interviews between now and then. And a lot of times Josh Luber has given a lot of his blueprint. He wrote a 50-page paper. Unless he's going to completely deviate from the paper and go 180 degrees. It's like, okay, so what you wrote in the paper, to each their own. Again, I'm just giving you my opinion on it. At the end of the day, take that for what it's worth, and take that for what I'm charging you, and you get a full refund if you're not happy with it. But at the end of the day, I'm sitting there like, a lot of these panels are almost, are almost like, we need to justify this. So here are some names, talking about relatively straightforward stuff. They'll say things and stuff, but I struggle to try to find, for the most part, where you're going to get your really crazy insights from this. What is the thought-provoking content that's going to be related to this? If I'm being 100% blunt to you, I feel that as a networking event, I think a lot of the most interesting conversations are going to happen off the stage from these individuals at various dinners and discussions in and around the Mint Collective. And I think that's where the real conversation is going to happen. But I think what's going to be in the panel is going to be the sanitized version for public consumption that isn't going to be nearly as insightful. Again, strictly my opinion, 100%. I'll raise my hand and own that. That is just what I think. I just don't know if the value's there. Hopefully your swag bag is good enough at $6.99. But like I said, if I was going to identify one specific one that I think has the best potential to be something interesting, I would pick this one. The authentication and grading, just because you got representatives of 4 main grading companies under one roof there. Potentially they can say some interesting things, but I think they're also going to be careful. They don't want to give each other too much information. But again, the potential is at least here for this to be interesting, and hopefully you get some benefit from my run through of the different ones. I don't know if this is the format going forward in the future. For me, I do think that the coin guys have it figured out where, like, I think a lot of the value is very specialized things. If you're going to charge somebody, it should be really specialized stuff where, like, really gets into the nitty gritty, not like 45-minute panels. And in the same vein, if you're going to have these, 1 hour or 45-minute things, I feel like that's where you have one or two people with high level expertise, go over it, make it available for public consumption, let people see it, let people learn, and kind of focus on that educational component of it. And at the end of the day, it's a trade show, and if people are going to share notes and everything, they're going to do it on the side, inside conversations anyway. So I think that's where if you're going there, I think as a networking thing, I think there is certainly value in there. I think that goes well beyond what you're going to get out of any of these panels. But once again, just my opinion strictly on it. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully you got some value out of this breakdown. Let me know kind of what you think about it. Did any of these panels strike you as something potentially interesting? Whether you intend to go or not, is this something you would even consider checking out? Would you consider paying $6.99, or would you consider paying $6.99, or somewhere in between? What kind of value do you think you could get out of these kind of panels and this kind of information and these players in the same room? So I'll leave it at that. I'm open to any thoughts or comments you might have in the comment section. Otherwise, like if you like the video, subscribe if you like the channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.